ThreatLocker Insights is going to be really powerful for us. I love the idea that it draws upon all the intelligence gathered across the ThreatLocker landscape. So we know, hey, is this an application that's been used a lot in the past? What's the risk level of it? We get that intelligence that brings us confidence in deploying for our clients.
Oh, wow. ThreatLocker Insights. This is one I'm the most excited about. Being able to see in depth what's going on at any point in time and using that data to make decisions that we need to make.
Patch management is one of the things that the industry's struggled with for years. The patch management coming from this platform is going to allow it to be done in an intelligent way, securely.
The ThreatLocker user store is going to be a game changer. Definitely need the ability to self-deploy pre-approved apps that already have built-out policies on an as-needed basis, especially for users that may not have been identified up front that they actually need that application.
Yeah, so for us, the user store is huge. When we first joined ThreatLocker, that was one of the first things we brought up was once an approval is put in for a request and a user has to wait around for a little bit, they just sit there and they wonder, what do I do next? Having that link in the approval box that says, hey, you are asking for a PDF viewer that may not be approved, but here's a list that already are. It just saves our time, it saves your guys' time, it saves everybody's time, it saves hassles, and it's already approved, already vetted, and everyone's ready to go, just like that.
The ability to have that approval for the web control, just like any other approval, is great because there's like marketing departments that need access to social media where they don't want the rest of the company to have access. You can actually allow social media just for one computer or a user or a group and still block it for everybody else. So having that granular control with that web filtering will be fantastic.
The new functionalities, I think, taken together provide a pretty unique value proposition. In cyber, I think telemetry, being able to deploy secure apps, being able to patch those apps, and then be able to get data enrichment is super critical. So now to see patch management, DNS, outbound requests, the App Store, and all the web data and telemetry and insights is going to be super crucial to be able to allow organizations to be agile and see single pane of glass.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, or good afternoon, depends where you're dialing in from. Today we're going to talk about the ThreatLocker Detect product. But before we begin, we want to think about why we created ThreatLocker Detect and how we thought about creating it. Today I'm joined by John Livingston, who's Director of Product for ThreatLocker Detect. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Danny.
John, you've been here for about a month now?
Yeah. My first week was actually ZTW, so definitely got thrown into the trenches there, but was happy to be there. It was a great experience, and happy to be here.
Yeah, well, John's joined us really from the endpoint of the user, and I say user, not end user, but the SOC manager, the person that's actually using the Detect products more than anybody. And the reason we asked John to join was because when ThreatLocker looks at products, we don't like to go and look at what products are out there and carbon copy them, because the problem is with all the products out there, they all have the same fundamental flaws. What we want to do is look at what we need to solve and what is the best way to solve it. And when we think about Detect, what is a Detect product? A Detect product's job is to look for indicators of compromise and be able to reply to them. And an indicator of compromise isn't necessarily an attacker on your server. It could be an internal insider threat. It could be someone uploading files to the internet, or it could be IRDP open on your misconfiguration. And we went back and said, how do we build a product that allows us to identify threats and automatically respond to them, or manually respond to them in the case of an EDR? And one of the nice things about ThreatLocker today is we have an MDR product behind our EDR, and we are the single biggest user of our own products. We've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of endpoints. So every pain point in the product, we feel more than anybody else does, which is why John's here, to make them go away.
Yeah, and actually, my second week here, I sat down with our MDR team and I asked them, I said, hey, look, if you could do anything today, what would you do? What would drive this product forward? And that's really what we're here to do, is we want to take this product and make it the industry standard.
So we released a bunch of new features at Zero Trust World. There's a bunch more coming in ThreatLocker Detect. When we built ThreatLocker Detect initially, we wanted to build it as a system that can be very, very flexible, very, very configurable, but also very, very easy to use. So we built things in like automated replies. So when you see an indicator of compromise, you can choose to send an alert if it's a low level maybe, or you could maybe automatically reply to an indicator of compromise, such as by restricting access. Now, I don't think you want to shut down a server automatically because somebody tries to run an IP scanner on it. But maybe you can do things like shut down admin tools until someone's looked at it. Because
and that's really the cool thing about ThreatLocker is it really allows that granularity because we're wrapping in all of the functionality into one suite that gives us that ability without taking down a critical server just to investigate.
So you could literally say, hey, if an indicator of compromise happens, until it can be investigated, I want to shut down PowerShell, I want to shut down command prompt, I want to shut down elevation controls of these programs. And that's obviously very powerful because it gives you, as the SOC manager or whoever the MDR is, time to respond and make sure that those files didn't get encrypted. Because the last thing you want to see in the SOC is, hey, there was an indicator of compromise and now the server's gone offline because they've rebooted into safe mode and they've disabled it.
Yeah, and I think that's really something, from a practitioner side, that's a lot of value because, when you're triaging an alert on, say, a critical infrastructure server, and, I'm going to be nervous because I want to say, hey, I see something going on here, but, if I take this server out of production right now, then there's a possibility that I'm, tanking our environment for no reason. So being able to limit that and say, okay, I'm going to limit the scope of what this server is doing to just bare fundamental essential functions.
Yeah, it's Active Directory. It can continue to serve Active Directory, but
absolutely,
you can't open a web browser. You can't.
That's right.
You can't do anything else. I think that's really important. Especially ThreatLocker looks after a lot of different types of companies, from hospitals. We've got hundreds of hospitals, banks, airports. Obviously, we don't want to see airports get shut down or airlines because that turns into bad news stories. And even MSPs who don't want to shut down their customer servers by mistake, because if you shut down your customer server, you're the person that's supposed to be there to bring it up, not shut it down. So these tools really allow expansion. Now, one of the problems we had before was, I think the two biggest negative feedback we got about our Detect product was, one, it didn't have enough charts and information. And people often call me a cyborg because I prefer to ingest data in ones and zeros than than charts and graphs. But the other was, I'm getting calls, and actually I don't even think this was from the customer. We were calling customers regularly, and we would say something as simple as, hey, someone connected to your server on RDP, it's open on a public IP address, and the customer would say, I'm going to shut that down. But then they'd never shut it down. And initially what we're seeing is 2,000 invalid logins on RDP. And then the customer says, I'm going to shut that down tomorrow. And then a week later, they still haven't shut it down. And the next thing we see is RDP connection followed by IP scanner running, followed by Mimikatz running. And we don't want to get that far. So we really changed the thought process of it and said, hey, if you're a security team, whether you're using a ThreatLocker MDR or whether you're using an in-house SOC, you're not necessarily in control of network configurations in your environment. But we wanted to make it really, really easy for you to give the tools to the end user, the IT department, to actually shut those down. So we built in automatic recommendations that can actually turn on policies.
Correct. Yeah. So, just starting out on with the first thing you were talking about, charts, we wanted to provide the high level snapshots of our organizations. And if we go ahead and look to my computer, I'd love to just jump in.
Yeah.
We wanted to say, okay, well, we know certain, organizations, they want these high-level snapshots of what's going on in their environment. How many incidents are being generated within a time frame? What are those incident outcomes? Do we have any specifically noisy alerts? All of these things. So we wanted to provide that data at a high level, but also make it valuable to the practitioner, to the analyst who's going to be working in these tools every day. And that's essentially what we've done here. So,
because if your SOC's filled up with one alert that's just noise,
yeah,
you need to reduce the aggressiveness of that alert in some way, or
that's
taking up people's time.
That's most definitely correct. We know that alert fatigue is most certainly a thing. So we want to take what's going on in our environment and say, okay, I see in the case of this bottom left situation here that, there's a lot of irregular cloud storage activity. Well, let's investigate that because we know that in certain circumstances like marketing, maybe they are working with a partner and they need that ability. So we're going to be able to see these things early on just by a visual glimpse of our dashboard. So I actually just want to take you through all of these charts and what we've got going on here, and we'll start at the top left with the incidents reviewed. So right now we're viewing this from our MDR side, and what we see here is for our time frame we have of 7 days, we've got some alerts within our environment. 61 of those alerts were taken care of by our Cyber Hero MDR service. And then we have 3 alerts that were taken care of by John Lilliston. What's cool about this, though, is this gives us the ability to demonstrate what's taken place, who our top performers are within our organization, but it also is drillable. So I can then click on all of the alerts that John Lilliston has triaged, and I can then go in and view the details and say, okay, I see there was an execution of NTDS util on a domain controller DC01. Why in the world is that happening? Is somebody trying to export our Active Directory database? Well, I can then over on the right side in the response details see, oh, they're performing a password audit for compliance purposes, and the Active Directory database needed to be exported for assessment.
So obviously indicator of compromise, but
yeah, but in this case,
not false positive, but necessarily.
But in this case, it was a valid business justification. We can go on to the next piece where we see that in private browsing was used via Microsoft Edge. As we can see here, John created a response, and there was actually an exclusion that took place, and we can see the alert clearing purpose was the behaviors permitted on this system due to a valid business justification.
So what we're saying, this user had valid business reasons to use in private browsing all the time. Yeah. And so we added an exclusion so we won't get alerts again. And we dated that exclusion, I can see very blurry a little bit, but till April 30th. So until April 30th, you weren't going to alert. But then after April 30th, I think that was a big important thing we added this year, the ability to temporary exclusions.
Yeah, that's a very powerful piece because, obviously in a security operations center, you are busy. And, what we need to do is we need to create a way for our analysts, our teams, to be able to say, okay, well, I know that this is going to be taking place for a temporary amount of time. I don't want to have to worry about going back in 15 or 30 days and removing that exclusion.
The amount of ransomware attacks, I feel like everything should be a temporary exclusion, even if it's temporary for a year, because the amount of security incidents and ransomware attacks we've seen where somebody had created a permanent exclusion and forgot to remove it. So they said, I just don't want to get any alerts from this user because they're doing things for the next 30 days and then forgot to remove it. So that temporary exclusion is really important.
And I think it really speaks to, the testament of ThreatLocker. We want to do things via best practices and, always revisiting and auditing any type of security gaps in our environment that might be necessary, like an exclusion, I think is a really powerful thing that we're, giving our users the ability to do.
Okay. I'll let you carry on.
So next we're going to talk about incident outcomes. We have a timeline graph here at our top right, and this has 2 purposes. One, we can see right off the rip what is an actioned incident versus what was cleared without an action. So when we think about that, we can think, okay, was an exclusion put in place for NTDS util? Okay, that's an actioned incident. Okay, was a system locked down, actioned incident? Or were we looking at something that was cleared without an action? And in that case, that's going to be something that we expect to see within our environment, and we just need to accept it.
So I feel like every incident, every alert comes with, in theory, is either an unlikely false positive, which means you should clear it without an action, a likely to reoccur. I use the word false positive, but exclusion for some description. So you might say IP scanner was ran, but maybe the IT person runs the IP scanner every Monday, so you could create an exclusion for that. And so in those cases, there'd be exclusions put in place, or of course a breach, which is, we shouldn't see many of these on these charts, especially if you're using
zero trust.
Yeah, especially if you're blocking with zero trust, you're blocking untrusted software, you're closing ports by default, because we're really talking about when someone messed up here. Real incidents only come in to detect when someone did something wrong somewhere else. So they allowed a remote access tool, they left a port open on their firewall, they did something they shouldn't do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I really like about this chart from a practitioner side is I can actually see the trends in my environment over time, because we know that, environments, they should be relatively static. IT environments should be slow to change over time. And so if I move our time frame for our dashboard out to the previous month, you'll see that we're actually going to get kind of some waves, ebbs and flows. And what that says is, I'm looking at this right off the rip, and I see that something very interesting happened on 3/28. Likely, I was told that we're going to do this webinar, and I started generating some activity. But also from an organizational side, I should see trends. I should be able to look at this and say, oh, that looks like that's probably a weekend date, because we know environments are going to be quiet in the weekend. And theoretically, over time, I should be able to pair any types of spikes with expected change within our environment. And if there is no expected change, then there's probably something that we need to look into.
Okay, so and then we've got obviously devices, and I see alerts by devices. Is that at the bottom left? Yes.
Yep. So this is a really cool chart, because what we can do with this is we can say, okay, show me all of the alerts within our environment for the time frame. And what I want to do here is I want to kind of get an understanding of what's noisy in our environment. Why do I want to do that? Well, as we alluded to earlier, alert fatigue is definitely a thing. And if we have an alert that continues to reoccur, maybe there's some possibility that we can more fine-tune it to be tailored to our environment.
You can also, so sometimes we'll see somebody set up an alert if like in private browsing. So that typically wouldn't create an alert for MDR or a SOC by itself. So if you have that creating an alert by itself, then you're either in a really, really strict environment, but we still want to know about it, because we want to know that if something else happens. So maybe there's an IP scanner ran on the machine, and you click on that alert, and then you see just before the IP scanner ran, somebody opened an in private window. Yeah. And if you're seeing, I've created an alert for anyone who opens in private, you're going to get bombarded with these alerts. But if you go and say, well, I'm just going to create an informational alert that doesn't necessarily put an action on my board, but when I do have a real alert, it shows me that informational alert as supporting information. Because again, opening PowerShell opens 15 times a day on somebody's machine. You don't want to get an alert every time PowerShell's open, but if something, you may use that to score alerts.
Yeah, so actually this might be a good time to talk about the feature that we've introduced, the policy chaining. Do you want to jump into that?
Yeah, and I think this is going to seem so small, but it's also, I think, one of the most powerful small features we've introduced in a long time. And my favorite example of this is, and there's hundreds of them, by the way, is not individual policies together, individual actions together necessarily aren't bad. And when you operate in a zero trust environment, what you're saying is you're really saying, I'm only going to give access where access is required. So in ThreatLocker, for example, most of the company do not need access to things like box.net and Dropbox and things like that. And most of the company don't need access to our financial files. But there are a department, my CFO needs access to all of our financial files, and they also need access to box.net and Dropbox. And the reason they have access to those is because we work with various investment funds, and they have strict policies as well, so they don't want us to share our OneDrive, and we don't want to share things on our OneDrive. So we have to upload certain annual reports to their organization. So I've got a situation where I've got a person or a handful of people that have access to shared storage on the internet and access to our financial files. And accessing either of those by themselves isn't a concern. And in some respect, even accessing some of those, both of them together isn't a concern. But when we start tying them together with multiple occurrences, now we have a different situation, because we're talking about a user potentially exfilling loads of data. So it's normal practice for my CFO to upload a financial report at the end of every month to box.net for a number of investors. It's not normal for him to upload 50 files or 100 files. So with these chain policies, we can start now saying, if this happens and this happens, Now I now want to respond automatically because time is of the essence. If someone's exfilling 1,000 files, there's no point in saying, oh, well, we'll send an alert to someone to review in 10 minutes because upload speeds are a gigabit now, so it's not going to be affected. So I want to respond by blocking access to their storage from the browser until which time it can be reviewed. And maybe you want to show how we can set that up.
Yeah, I most certainly would love to do that. So, and before I start, I want to emphasize that I agree with your assessment that this is probably one of the most unique and powerful features that we have introduced, because the ability to use things like logic gates, which is essentially what this is, allows us to take across the MITRE attack matrix, and we can say, let's look at something that on its own, as you said, is not a definitive indicator of compromise, and chain it to other things that over time we can start to observe the attack progressing within an environment. So what I have here is I just have a simple endpoint detect policy called irregular cloud storage site visited. And what this policy is looking for this demonstration is we're going to look for an action type of network, and then a destination domain is excluded for ThreatLocker. And I excluded ThreatLocker because we know that obviously people within our organization, they're going to be going to threatlocker-my.sharepoint.com, which is OneDrive. But what I do want to do is I want to look for any other SharePoint websites, or in this case, Pastebin, and I want to say...
And we could obviously add as many cloud storage as we want on that.
Yes, you can. And eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to do this by category tagging via
with
web control.
Yes, and so at the moment, you can actually use any network control policy, any application policy here. So if you've got a network control policy that reports cloud storage, you could just go onto that as well. And web control as well will be also built into there using our categories on web control. So you don't have to go in and
explicitly add domains. You can say, hey, if I see that this category cloud storage is visited, but not ThreatLocker's cloud storage, I want to know about it. Right?
Yes.
And in certain scenarios, this could be considered quite noisy. But again, on its own, this isn't necessarily indicative of anything, because we know that suppliers, maybe they have to go out to one of their partners' website or cloud storage and update an Excel sheet with what they want to order, things like that.
So in this case, what you've done is you've created a warning, which would actually create a warning, which should create a lot of noise. So we'd want to change this to either information or not necessarily even create an alert.
Yes, you could change this to informational, and that would prevent this from generating a lot of noise within your environment. So we're going to save that, and so that's what I would consider the qualifying policy. And so essentially, in order to get to the next stage of a kill chain, an attack progression, you have to match these qualifying policies first. And so then we move on to the next stage, which would be where we see data exfil via browser upload. And this is going to be the actual policy that we care about. And so what this is going to do is we're going to be looking for storage action type of read.
Yes.
And so we want something that reads, and we want to use occurrences. I think this is really important as well. This is a really cool feature. I just consider them to be advanced data analytics against the activity that we're observing on an endpoint.
Because one file isn't so bad, but 6 files.
Exactly. And what's really cool is we can say within 2 minutes. So we can actually say, hey, there's a high concentration of exfiltration or data upload via Microsoft Edge, and we are excluding certain paths that we just expect Microsoft Edge to read data from. For example, the app data folder, or the hosts file, as well as Microsoft Edge itself.
And then what you've set there is you've got previously matched policy matches the detect policy.
Yes.
That you just created.
And that is the crux of what we want to talk about here, because this policy here, data exfil via browser upload, can only trigger within my environment if within the last hour the endpoint has been observed visiting cloud storage. And of course, this is customizable. We could say within the last 10 minutes if we chose.
Now, what's nice about this is obviously we're using this as a data exfil, and people often think about data exfil inside a threat. Oh, I'm going to copy something onto a USB drive. Now, most ThreatLocker customers at this point are blocking USB drives. We're auditing all files that are coming onto USB drives. But the reality is no one's using USB drives anymore. It's not 2005. It's 2025. So people are using cloud storage there, sending it to their own Gmail. So you can also build in extra things here. And for most users, you could actually get away without the previously matched policy on this if you put a higher number. So you might have a policy that says, hey, if I've got more than 20 files, regardless of the websites they've been to, I want to create an alert. If they've gone to any of these listed sites, and you could list Gmail and you could list anything else, I want to immediately respond. And I see you've create an alert here to automatically create that alert, so you do get notified now that they've done this. But is there other things we can do here as well?
Yes, there are. So we can call, let's see here, we can enable a storage control policy. So if we observe this alert generating, then we can say, okay, well, until I investigate this, because this is highly irregular behavior, I'm going to enable storage control to prevent Microsoft Edge from reading any unnecessary files while I investigate.
So we basically created a storage control policy to say that Edge can't access any files on our system, which in many cases is a good default policy to have anyway.
It would be.
So, and we would have it in ThreatLocker for a lot of our team where they can't upload files to the internet, period. But in many cases, we'll say that some people need to. If you're in sales, you need to upload things to the internet. If you're in finance, you probably do. So if you're running a kiosk in a bank, probably not. So you have that storage policy, but you have it disabled for the majority of users. And then we just go in and say, if this happens instantaneously, it enables the policy, creates an alert. So the user is now put a roadblock in front of them while the SOC or the MDR or whoever's looking after the response gets to see, is this a false positive? And if it's a false positive, they clear it, the alert goes away, all problem solved.
Yes.
But in the meantime, data wasn't exfilled. And this, of course, is great for ransomware as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We know that, ransomware groups, they're going to leverage cloud storage pretty frequently because we know that, these types of resources are very difficult to block explicitly when you don't have something like web control.
Now, I don't like to talk too much about futures, but I will mention one that we're adding here, which is the ability to include the process ID in there as well, and then kill the process.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that'll be a really powerful feature that, especially since we're introducing granularity in these policy chaining, we can guarantee high fidelity alerts. That is, if this policy triggers, we're 99% certain that this is a problem, and we're going to want to kill that process right off the rip.
And that obviously works with things like, hey, someone ran, of course, if they're ring fencing PowerShell, they shouldn't do this, but they ran a PowerShell script to exfil all the data. It's going to go, oh, PowerShell read more than 20 files, boom, that process is dead.
That's exactly right. And, what really, I think, plays to ThreatLocker's advantage in this area is how we process our policies. Our policies are real time. That's something that isn't really being done within the rest of the EDR space.
I think you said that when you started, and I have a really strict policy. I don't want to know what anyone else does, and I didn't know that most EDRs are processing the policies up at the cloud 2-3 minutes later.
Yeah, and actually, I'd love to demonstrate this right now. So within my demo environment, I'm just going to go to a OneDrive website that is not ThreatLocker. And what I'm going to do is, if we refresh, we can see the irregular cloud storage site was visited 11:32, which is right now. So already we've reported in on that. And I just want to demonstrate how fast this works. So the second I pull these over and they're done uploading, my agent has already reported that in. That is extraordinarily fast. And that is something that I, in the practitioner side, have not seen. So I personally think that is extraordinarily powerful, especially once we get into talking about killing a process, because we know that the second the agent records this behavior, we can terminate, or we can enable a ring fencing or storage control policy immediately.
So I've got a couple of questions, and while we're on this page, and I'm not sure I can actually show you Teams, but if you jump into support, if you jump on your solution engineer, they can get it working with Teams, because I don't know the Teams API details. But someone had asked, how do you send an alert to webhook? So if you want to pull up the alerts there, we can show if you had a policy how you can. They've explicitly asked Teams, but I don't know anything about the Teams API. But if they have webhooks, so we can send to them.
Yeah, we can demonstrate, or we can just kind of walk through that. Sales engineer would definitely be a good resource, but all we have to do, ThreatLocker makes it extremely easy to do, is under policy actions, we're going to go call REST API, call webhook.
And we have client and server there. So, and the difference being, one goes to ThreatLocker and then we call it. The other one is it goes straight to the REST API. This is really useful if you've got an on-site SIM.
Yes.
You got something on site, we don't necessarily have access to it,
Exactly.
but the client can call directly and say, I'm going to call this webhook. And when you call it, it just asks all of the details on there, what you need. And we did add support for bearer tokens as well with that recently, which is nice. So very simple. You pick it, you fill in the URL, and your solution engineer can help you. If you are a ThreatLocker partner or customer, you can actually just schedule a call with your solution engineer. We don't charge for that. They'll walk you through it. You should be doing a call semi-regularly anyway, and they'll help you through that. So we're going to go into the reports in a bit more. So let me just mark these as answered, because known common chained events. Okay, so someone has asked, can we leverage known chained events and bring it to their attention? And we already do that. So there's two parts to ThreatLocker. So you can turn on ThreatLocker Detect right now, and all of the standardized IOCs that we're constantly updating, we're constantly looking at cyber attacks, we've got honeypots out there, they are going to be pushed to your agent immediately. So you don't have to think about, oh, I need an IOC if someone runs Mimikatz or someone does an IP scan. That's automatically going to run on your agent the moment you turn that on. And we can turn it off, but it's by default. All of them are out the box. And as new indicators of compromise come out there, we're going to automatically add them for you. The second thing is you can then add your own, because what we're going to look for is known indicators of compromise. We're not necessarily going to look for, hey, my CFO is stealing too much data, I'm going to automatically extract it. So that's where we're going to help you. And there's a whole load of policies and community around that. But also, again, if you use your solution engineer, they can really help you set these things up, and you can get your brain juices running, and you could start doing really cool stuff. Things like if a user does an IP scan, I'm going to automatically shut down PowerShell, command prompt, and the Internet browser, just for the hell of it. And you can put those policies in place, and it just means, hey, my server is now unusable to anyone who's logged into it, and we got a little bit of time to respond. So you can add all of these customizations in place, but we're automatically building known indicators of compromise, and they're going to our MDR, and we'll respond, or going to you if you don't have our MDR. I do recommend, if you don't have a 24-hour SOC, you use our MDR. Our MDR is relatively cost-effective. It's
and efficient.
And very, very efficient. I mean, the response time, I accidentally ran IP scanner when I was in a demo yesterday, and they called me within 2 minutes saying, hey, someone's running IP scanner on your machine. So they're very, very fast, very efficient. And you can even say, hey, I don't want you to respond. I just want you to call and alert us that something happened. So it's an extra step. I mean, someone else is watching your back. It doesn't hurt. And I feel like EDR is only good if you've got a good SOC behind it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as you said, if you don't have a 24/7 SOC, or it's just maybe you, our EDR, our MDR is definitely ready to work with you.
And somebody just asked, can we allow access to only the OneDrive tenant? And yes, the answer is yes. You can do that through network control or web control. You can say only allow ThreatLocker my SharePoint.
ThreatLocker-my.sharepoint.
Yeah, so there'll be a domain, and then you can, and our policies run in order. So when you do network control or web control policies, they run top to bottom. So you could say deny all project management, for example, or deny SharePoint.com, but then just above that, allow ThreatLocker.
Yeah, it's a very powerful functionality that I think solves a lot of real world issues within a security operations center and the enterprise environment in general.
And I think someone's just asked, what happens if you use SharePoint? That is legit. There is no such thing as legit or not legit. SharePoint is a real tool.
It's just use and bad use.
Yeah, so you allow your SharePoint, don't allow someone else's SharePoint. If you need to allow lots of other people's SharePoint, allow it, but limit the number of files that can be uploaded. Mm-hmm. There's no right or wrong answer on.
No.
It should just limit the access as much as possible, and where you can't limit, alert on anything outside the norm.
That's exactly right.
Let me see what else we've got. ThreatLocker Detect does not depend on web control at all. ThreatLocker Detect does depend on other components inside ThreatLocker. It uses network control to read telemetry data from your network. It uses application control. You don't have to block, but it uses application executions to detect application anomalies, and it uses storage to detect storage. It does not depend on web control. You don't have to use web control. Technically, all the network traffic goes through network control, regardless whether you're using web control. No, you can't enable a web control policy, but you can enable a network control policy if you don't have web control. And I'm just seeing, where do the templates, these policies? I'm just see if I can answer some of these. So somebody's asked the question, and the answer is right now no, but we are working on this very, very heavily. And it's been a challenge actually. It's been something we were working on for a few years, but it's getting very close to imminent. And what they've asked is, can we scan insider files for PII, basically healthcare, personal information, healthcare information, credit card numbers? Now we've tried to go through 10 different revisions of this, and it was actually very difficult because when you open a file on the operating system, our goal is to not slow down the operating system. We've done this great job at keeping our agent really, really efficient and small footprint. But then if you start doing regular expressions on a 2 megabyte Word document, things get messy. So what we actually found out, what we did recently, is we started classifying files. We haven't released this yet, and this is part of our storage control component. And what it will do is when you create files in the background, it will queue them to be classified. So rather than interfering with your creation of the file, it could be a few seconds later, but it's not going to delay your save by a few seconds. It's going to allow your save to be instant. It's going to classify them. It's going to put them in a list saying this contains PII, this contains social security numbers. And then you can use those categories. You'll be able to use them in all products and Detect. That's not something we have right now, but it's something we are working on. I'm trying to see. I see details in the header. I have it basically without passing a variable over. I don't know what that means. Someone's mentioned that they see details, header and body section. I have it basically without passing variable over. You can use variables in those.
In the alerts?
Yes.
Yes, you can. And so what that means, if we go back to my computer, and I will pull up a policy. Let me just find.
And actually, we just made a change because someone's attacked their server. So you won't get the same alert twice. So if it's got, so the variables are actually really useful to make sure that, hey, I don't want to get the same alert 50 times, but if someone opens a different file, I want to know about it. So if you put full path as a variable and someone opens angry IP and then someone opens IP scanner, you'll get both alerts. But if someone tries to open angry IP 10,000 times, or it goes into like a loop of trying to start, you're not going to get slammed with 10,000 of the same alert over and over again.
Right.
And did you just show the variables then, yeah?
Yes.
So, and sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the screen. Is different from just ThreatLocker? I do run it, but my screen does not have the options I see on your screen. I'm kind of... Okay, so ThreatLocker, the ThreatLocker platform, someone's asked, is the ThreatLocker Detect different from just ThreatLocker? I do run it on my screen, but I don't have all the options I see on my screen. I think it depends on what you should have the products enabled. If you don't have an option, it will say this product's not enabled. It is a component. You should see everything that we're seeing on our screen. If you go into modules and ThreatLocker Detect,
yes.
If you don't have it as a module, you could turn it on from the organizations page. If you haven't licensed it, you reach out to your account manager because they could get you maybe discounts and deals rather than just turning it on because you'll be billed at the retail price of it. Okay, so someone asked, does MDR team carry out hunt threats in the customer environment? They look for indicators of compromise, which will trigger alerts, and then they'll use all of the data. So maybe we can show that when there is an incident where you can see all of the executes, all of the network traffic when we do get an alert there. Do you mind pulling that up, John?
Yeah.
So when you get an alert, you can see, because when you get an alert, our thing is, how do you know that the system is compromised? So in the same alert page, if you just click on any of the alerts, you can see everything else that's going on in that system, and we'll even cross-reference it with virus total data. And if our MDR team is looking at it, they're going to go and cross-reference with other things. So if they're looking for an indication of compromise or initial access. So when you go into an alert here, across the top, we have this bunch of tools, and our MDR team use this on every single one. So they'll go into executes, and they'll look at every execute. They'll cross-reference it with known virus databases. They'll see if something suspicious happening. Because again, something PowerShell by itself or an unknown piece of malware might not be thing. But if this new program just ran, they'll see that new program or denied program. They can see every new file that was installed on the machine. And again, if they need to look across other machines because they're still unsure, so if they've got this system that's got suddenly files being encrypted, but there's nothing running on it, and there's no process ID, they can look at other machines in your environment to see was something else running that as well. And you can see elevations and everything else about the machine in one central place. And we will do that, and we will look at that. Whenever something comes in, our job is to figure out, is there a threat in your environment? Somebody's asked about our web control. I won't get too much into it because we did have a webinar on it last week. I think the biggest thing you're going to see is that approval process, our ability to process policies in order versus another web control product, our ability to request really, really easily. So it pops up and says, this has been blocked. Do you want to request access? It's very, very simple. It will show you the user that went to the website. The user experience is unbelievable, and the approval process is less than a minute. And then you can also order it. It logs all web traffic in one central unified order as well. That is unbelievable. And it's not just filtering through a DNS server, but when you take your laptop home, it's also filtering on your laptop at home as well. So we can see everything that's happening at home. So somebody's asked a question, and I'm just going to get a nod. Do we have our web control webinar on YouTube that was last week? Yes. So if you missed the web control webinar, it is on our YouTube channel, so you can go in there and see that on YouTube. And I'm not going to get through all of these because they're coming in pretty fast.
Yeah, and I have a few more things that I really want to tell everybody about, if you're all right with that.
Yes, go ahead.
So if we go back to my dashboard, I just want to pick up on two final areas. First off, recommendations. This is an extremely powerful thing that we've developed. So as you alluded to earlier with RDP, so our MDR, we can say, hey, we've called one of our organizations about saying, hey, you're getting hit from a public IP address on RDP. Is this something that you expect in your environment? And of course, typically not, and they'll say, oh, we'll take care of it. But life happens, things get busy, they forget. So what we've done is we've introduced this really cool recommendations feature where our Cyber Hero MDR or a self-managed organization can create these recommendations. And essentially what they do is they say the Cyber Hero team has recommended enacting one of the three recommendations. And this is just going to remind and give the user, the consumer of our product, a one-click experience to further secure their environment.
So let's talk about this one. So someone obviously got a connection on public IP, MDR. MDR picked it up, no doubt called the customer. Maybe the connection's not through yet, password's invalid, but you're seeing it over and over again. Invalid login, invalid login. And it's only a matter of time until that invalid login becomes a valid login.
One.
Yeah. So the customer has really two solutions. One is, So
the first one is going to be a combination. So let's say that, hey, my web server, I need to be able to RDP in it. I don't know why that would be, but that's up to the customer to decide. And so we'll take that information. We'll say, okay, well, we'll create a policy to explicitly permit RDP for your web server. But then if it's not necessary, let's go ahead
and on that
deny
policy,
it.
we've actually created the dynamic ACL there, have we? So we're saying, because one of the things you can do in network control is you can do dynamic ACL. So you can say, I need RDP from my laptop, but I don't know my IP address all the time, so I've opened it for the whole world. So in the allow policy would say, permit RDP to this computer from Danny's laptop.
Yes.
And it will track the IP address, but then deny for the rest of the world.
Yes. This specific policy did not use that, but that is absolutely something that is possible. So we have this first recommendation. The second recommendation, which would be, more of a zero trust approach, would be we're just going to block inbound RDP for everybody in the organization. And so the customer has the option to enable one of these rule sets, whether it be the 2 or the 1, or they can say, hey, I'm going to resolve this.
And this could be,
way.
I put it on my edge firewall, I blocked RDP on my...
Exactly, in which case, ThreatLocker wouldn't have to take action. Or, if this is something they've said, hey, I've thought about it, I'm not really interested in remediating this at all, they can just reject it. And then they can put a
reason, and then their manager can explain to their manager later on why you rejected a recommendation to lock down RDP. And what's nice about this is this will continue to show on your quarterly reports.
Yes, it will. And that's actually something, a final thing that I wanted to talk about. Let me just cover our exclusions. We finally have an area within our dash to explain a snapshot of what ThreatLocker is not looking at in your environment. Because obviously, as Zero Trust approach, we want to protect everything and, deny by default and permit by exception. But in certain scenarios, we have to allow the business to operate. And so an exclusion might be necessary for one reason or another. In this case, we know, we can see here, go back to the NTDS util situation. We know based on the dismissal reason that they're doing a compliance password audit. So they have to dump all of the password hashes from Active Directory and assess them. And so we can see that this set to expire April 8th at 11 p.m. And then anything after that will be notified again if NTDS util runs.
And that's important, because knowing what isn't uncovered, and if you're working with a ThreatLocker solution engineer, they should be going through this with you every quarter, saying, hey, you've got these exceptions, you've got these recommendations, you've rejected them, maybe we can revisit them and actually help you, because there's nothing we hate more than a customer getting hit by cyber attack because they didn't do what we said. So we're going to constantly remind you.
And actually that's a perfect segue into the final thing I want to talk about. This is something that we're actively developing, and I just thought it was way too exciting not to share here, because we do anticipate releasing this feature within the next couple weeks. Is a reporting feature that will give a snapshot of your environment on either a reoccurring schedule. So say, hey, I want to know everything that happened within my environment for the previous month, and I can schedule that to run on the first of every new month. Or I can run it on demand, and I can say, hey, I need to know what's going on the last 7 days. I've been out. I got to catch up.
So we can see everything from, and we're expecting 2 weeks on this one, hopefully to be available to at least in some kind of beta for customers.
That is the goal.
So we can see all of the events we ingested. This is obviously really good if I think you've got an executive and a technical.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is going to be a combined report. This will be a combination of the executive and the operational report or technical report. And so on the left-hand side, we have high level snapshot of our environment with the graphs that we can see within the Detect dashboard. And then we also have our, I guess they're called donut chart. And essentially we go left to right. So we can say, hey, over the past X amount of time, ThreatLocker has ingested 6.2 million events. And of those 6.2 million events, we've aggregated and processed and correlated down to 568,000 alerts. And then from that, of those 568,000 alerts, we've further normalized and correlated to 138 incidents. And then our final outcome would be, over the past X amount of time, we've issued 10 recommendations.
And that last one could be 10 recommendations and 3 lockdowns, or 10 recommendations, or obviously, hopefully we're never doing a lockdown, because that means something really was bad and we were...
Yeah, exactly. And you might not even need a report to know that happened.
So now this obviously is good as well if you're an IT manager and you want to show your CEO how good a job you're doing and how much work you're doing, and how important is the cyber tools. But also if you're a technology company and you want to show that to your client, I think you can brand the top right corner for your own logo.
The top right corner, you will be able to insert your own organizational logo. And then on the right side, we will have more of an operational snapshot. So what exclusions are in my environment right now? What recommendations have been made? And then we'll have a third page that will actually have all of the incidents.
We have a question of will these reports be able to be scheduled?
Yes, they will be able to. You will be able to schedule them. That can be a reoccurring schedule, or it can be a one-time schedule.
And I'll address this, even though this is a very difficult question. We'd love to be able to see this map to NIST and CIS frameworks. NIST and CIS don't necessarily have clean frameworks of, hey, this control maps this and this control acts this, because quite often the terminology, like you must have authentication mechanism that validates someone with, and there's so many different systems. It doesn't necessarily say that you're compliant, because what if you don't have dual factor authentication on monday.com? We can't tell you that. However, we are working very heavily on, I suppose, having a violations dashboard of this is a direct violation of this control. This is a direct violation of this control. So you can see all of your violations where they're fit. Now, it doesn't mean you're compliant if everything's green, because you might have another system, but it's something we've been looking at for a long time. And somebody asked about where the policies are. The policies are built in. You don't necessarily need to see them. They're there. They're going to get the alert straight away. Just download IP Scanner on your machine and you'll see an alert pop up straight away. Immediately. But there are policies in community as well you can add if you want to create your own additional custom policies. And there are hundreds of policies already there in the background, and they're adding probably 10, 20 a week. Is that accurate? Or?
Yeah, we're hard at work. Our intelligence team is constantly looking through, our intelligence feeds, and we're processing and disseminating and creating content within our ThreatLocker platform. So continuous reinvestment into the platform to create better, more high quality out of the box detections.
I'll just finish out. If you haven't done a full demo of ThreatLocker, we'll walk you through this. We'll put this in your environment. We'll do a free POC. We'll show you how powerful ThreatLocker can be. And ThreatLocker really does offer you everything. We're just talking about Detect today, but it offers you everything from blocking untrusted software to elevating applications that need to run as an admin, to controlling USB, to auditing file access, to ring fencing applications so they can't eat your data. It will show you what countries the software that you're running is developed in. It will show you what coupon clippers you're running and whether they have access to your passwords. It will show you websites you're running, and it has massive amounts of power from beginning to end. It really is a complete endpoint protection platform. So if you haven't done a demo, please schedule a demo. There's a link in the chat as well that you should be able to see to schedule a demo. If not, just go to threatlocker.com and book a demo from there. And John, thank you for joining, and you're doing a great job on the tech team and the MDR team now. So thank you very much for
Thanks for having me.
Being here, and
awesome.
We look forward to seeing, I think there's another webinar coming out in about 10 days. We're actually going to be going proper ways to whitelist applications. We've been doing that a long time, but I think there's a lot of customers who don't necessarily know the beginning to end, and also a lot of people that haven't seen a demo of whitelisting. So we'll be doing that on the next webinar, which will be published soon. But thank you very much, everybody.